Sitting. Lisa, we've had a busy couple of days this week, haven't we?
We have had a couple of busy months, yes.
Yeah. For those of the folks here that don't know you, I've had the opportunity to get to know you over the last several months, and I don't know that I have seen the Department of Education ever this busy. And you in particular, I know that your team is just putting in a lot of hours, a lot of effort to really see some tremendous things happen in our state. So for you, what's exciting you most in the work that you're doing right now?
So I think my work focuses on the standards and materials work, and the Governor's Literacy Initiative falls under my office. But I think that's all great. That's your day-to-day work. I have had the opportunity over the past 3 months to visit 15, 20 schools all across the state, from Sullivan County all the way to Memphis. And not being in the classroom anymore, getting to go into classrooms, watching passionate teachers and watching children is the thing that inspires me the most. Because, when you work long hours on literacy initiatives and frameworks and thinking about how best to help children read, sometimes you don't always see the children in that. So it's pretty exciting to get to actually see children. A couple weeks ago, we were in Sullivan County, and a second grade teacher was leading a lesson on westward expansion. And the kiddos were talking about the buffalo and how the buffalo moved, and they had just read a text about the buffalo. And one of the second graders got so excited. He was like, so the Native Americans moved because the buffalo moved. And he went on and on and on, and we walked out of that classroom, and the principal was like, he's a homeless student. He never engaged before, and because we've done this new work around literacy, he's on par with his peers. So that was pretty exciting. And then last week, I was in Sumner County, and we were walking through kindergarten through fourth grade classrooms, and a first grade teacher asked her students to tell us some of the vocabulary they had learned in their lessons. And they had just finished studying Martin Luther King's speech, and some of the kiddos said segregation and equity, and those are words you expect kiddos, not necessarily 7-year-olds, but expect kiddos to be talking about when they're talking about Martin Luther King. And this little girl, she didn't look 7, she looked 5, was sitting there, she goes, I learned the word oasis. And everybody just kind of got quiet, because you don't necessarily think about oasis with Martin Luther King's work. And this little boy across the room goes, yeah, Martin Luther King said that his dream was to make an oasis out of Mississippi and ensure everyone had equity. 7. To hear 7-year-olds having that conversation and not being prompted by their teacher to engage in conversation really speaks to the work that our educators are trying to do right now, and really speaks to the work that we're trying to accomplish with literacy. So while there are long hours and long days, the thing that inspires me is getting to hear children speak about their learning, getting excited about that learning. I was just an hour ago listening to two teachers talk at the subcommittee hearing, and hearing their passion also is really starting to be empowering. To hear teachers think about teaching literacy differently, ensuring that kiddos are learning to read, but also building knowledge of the world through reading is pretty exciting. And those are part of our focal areas with our literacy initiative, is first making sure our kiddos have the ability and capacity to read well, and that we're teaching that in a science-based way, and then that our students during their reading experiences are learning about the world, learning about Martin Luther King, learning about the westward expansion, and getting the kind of exposure they might not get in their rural community or their urban community, and having those experiences through literature is very exciting.
Yeah. It's really what we're wanting for all of our children, isn't it?
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, I know for our foundation in particular, I think one of the things that is most inspiring for us is actually getting out and meeting with some of the school districts across the state. What most folks wouldn't know is that Governor's Early Literacy Foundation, we started in 2004 to support and grow Dolly Parton's Imagination Library statewide. And this year, we're actually piloting for 30,000 students across the state a summer reading pilot for kindergarten to third graders. So all rising first, second, and third graders will be receiving books over the summer in June, July, and August to help supplement what we believe is contributing to summer slide and hopefully helping to elevate third grade reading scores. So I think what we're seeing now is what's inspiring to me is being in all of those school districts, hearing from teachers, superintendents, and administrators, just the excitement around what's happening in education in Tennessee.
I definitely think that. I think, our teachers are working as hard as they possibly can teach with the best things that they possibly can do and the best training that they can have. And we are working so hard on literacy, and we've been working hard on literacy for decades. It does take a village. It takes a community. It takes the Governor's Early Literacy Foundation and organizations helping our families think about literacy, helping our teachers have the resources and the capacity to do well. And I think it does take a village to really think about literacy.
Well, just on that, and, we've had a couple of conversations around early literacy. What are some of the things that are standing out to you as you're moving forward with these new plans with Department of Education? Talk a little bit about early literacy and what's sort of standing out as important.
So I think there was a time in education where differentiated learning was very popular. And we met children where they were, we set expectations where they were, and we moved with them. We didn't set a bar that was high for all learners. And I think the shift in the movement is all children can do this. All children can read, all children can talk about OASIS, all children can talk about westward expansion, all children should have the opportunity to engage in rigorous learning, all children should have the opportunity to learn to read. It's a civil right. It is actually something that we should ensure all children have the right to be engaged in rigorous concepts. All children have the right to learn to read, and it changes their pathway. And so I think there was a time in education where we thought differentiated learning was the way, and we asked teachers to do all these little leveled reading groups and move that work, and it was exhausting for our teachers. But what our cognitive science is saying now is that all children can do that, we just have to support them up instead of differentiating where they are. So I think it's important to set high expectations for all of our children, but give our teachers the training and resources to be able to have high expectations and support their children up. And that's the focus of our literacy work, is really to give our teachers the materials, the support, and the training to be able to hold all children to high expectations and to support them while we're holding them in that space.
Yeah. One of the things that I think we've all seen in education is there's a lot of good ideas, right? And there's a difference between a good idea and an effective idea. And I'm wondering if you've seen things that seemed like a good idea at the time, didn't turn out quite as well as you wanted, but then have seen maybe what seemed like a more effective idea, and now you're seeing it have an impact.
Well, I think what's exciting is for a long time in education, we did what we felt was right. And it was a new and innovative idea because our gut said that was good for children, but we have a body of science now that actually shows these are the practices that help children learn to read. These are the practices that help children to engage in conversations. These are the practices that help children be effective writers. Those practices, now that we can put those in place for teachers, it's not, I think that I'm doing a good job, it's that we have the research and the body of evidence to support them. So that's not, there was a lot of time that we had great ideas and we tried them, but now we have some science behind our ideas to actually support our teachers and say, we know this to be true because there's science behind that. So it's pretty exciting to be in a space where you've got cognitive psychologists and a lot of researchers really focusing on the work you're trying to do, because it's frustrating as a teacher to say, I have this really great idea, I'm going to try this, and it didn't work, because they're children, and you're trying to support children, and when you're trial and erring with children, children lose. So I think the opportunity to not have great ideas and test them, but actually know from a body of evidence this is working for our children and spreading that is an exciting time in education.
Yeah. So, yesterday we got an opportunity to hear from Natalie Wexler talk about her book, The Knowledge Gap, and what she's done there, and that was very inspiring. I know it's helped to inform both of our work. Is there anyone else that's inspiring you, anything that you're reading, thinking about in terms of education?
So I talked about that cognitive science and cognitive psychologist. Dan Willingham has done a large body of research around why children struggle learning to read, and really distilled some of the reasons our children in third grade are struggling. And he says a third of the children don't hear sounds. Our children aren't actually hearing the sounds to do the sound symbol combination. A third of our children struggle with fluency. That's an easier fix, right? Because we can practice reading. And then a third of our children who don't. So now we know that the thing we're missing is that sounds component. So it's really exciting to take someone's, typically we take that kind of research and we say, that's really interesting. But to be able to actually carry that into practice is exciting. And to think about how do we help those children who are struggling in third grade back in the birth to 5 years and in the early literacy years to actually put things in place and support our teachers at helping our children excel is very exciting and inspiring.
Yeah. And so what does that mean as you look at implementing something like that statewide to impact all kids? Like what does that look like?
So right now, our plan, a lot of times in the department, we take one piece, we take coaching or we take this training class and we offer that statewide. One of the things I'm so proud about the Governor's Literacy Initiative is there is a significant amount of funds so that all schools have access. It's not, if you want to come, pay for your teachers to come and we'll provide the training. We actually have funds for teachers to get materials at no cost across the state, no matter where you are. Funds for teachers to receive 2 weeks of free training this summer, plus stipends. A lot of times we'll offer training, but we won't actually stipend our teachers to come to that training. So there's enough funds in there for stipends. And then implementation support. One of the things that we were talking about over in legislative committee is this is different. It's not like we can drop materials and train teachers for 2 weeks and say good luck. We actually have to support teachers for a long period of time, and there's enough money in the budget to support any elementary school that wants 4 years of coaching support in that space. So it allows us to have a full system. So we have materials, we have training, and we have ongoing coaching support to really support our teachers well, and I think that's a first for the state. We did some training that was opt-in 2012, didn't pay stipends, saw a decent bump, but then that leveled off. Then we said, bring your coaches and we'll do some coach stuff. But we didn't say, here are the materials to go with the coaching and connect it to the training. So having all of those supports for our early literacy teachers is pretty exciting. I think where we are is understanding that some districts have been doing this for several years, and how do you support those districts in a way that makes sense? And some districts haven't had access, their teachers don't have the resources. How do we help them on-ramp into this space? So I think as a state entity, we've got to think about the different spaces that our districts are in, but making sure that every child in every classroom has access to a teacher who has great materials, has been trained, and has that kind of ongoing support to really allow our children to read successfully.
Yeah. So it's really more of a holistic approach in figuring out how to address this. I know for us as a foundation, we've been looking for gaps in early literacy. Where are the places that our foundation could contribute to early literacy efforts in the state? So, as we're looking at storybook trails or book buses or kindergarten to third grade or caregiver engagement, we've got people from all different sectors here working. Are there other gaps that you're seeing around early literacy that those outside of the department could be thinking about in terms of addressing, or needs that you see coming on the horizon?
I do think we are in a digital age community. We have our devices, we have our technology, and we spend a lot of time in that technology space. Yeah. So the more we can create a culture of literacy, the more we can create a culture of building knowledge. I think the storybook trails are about the coolest thing on the planet, because it engages our children and their families in just a conversation. And the more we can encourage those conversations, and the more we can put the technology away, talk, build language at an early age, have those conversations, encourage children to build background knowledge and have experiences in their early childhood, regardless of what organization and entity, that provides a child more ready to come into the classroom, learn to read, build knowledge of the world. So it's not that we all have to become teachers of reading per se, even though that may not be our skill set or our expertise or our area of impact, but we can create a community of literacy and a community of children who are excited to learn about the world, excited to go to the zoo, go to the library, get out with their parents, create that culture of learning early, because when they come to kindergarten or pre-K and they don't have those experiences, we have to build those experiences for our children. If they come not hearing sounds, you have to help them develop those sounds. So the more they have opportunities to talk with their families, the more they have the opportunity to get out of their city block or out of their farm and get in and have those experiences, the more we all are participating in building a community of learning. I think a lot of times we think everybody has to be a reading expert or they have to put books in their spaces, but it's about creating a culture of learning and wrapping around our families and reminding them that they're families and they have to talk to each other, they have to hear each other, they have to turn off the TV. I have a 4-year-old grandson, and when my daughter calls me or FaceTimes me and I see the TV in the background, it drives me insane because I want her to have conversations with my grandson, and I want him to have all those experiences. And I think that's what all of us can use our voice to help families, to help resources, and really help our families have those culture of learning and have that opportunity to talk, have conversation, and be in that space more often.
Yeah. So in terms of all of your experience in education, has there been anything that's been really unique or innovative that you've seen in education that you really liked or thought was effective?
I think the movement we're in now around materials, a lot of time as teachers, I know all of us have teacher friends and probably know that on Sunday afternoons or on Tuesday and Thursday nights, they are hunting and gathering for resources for the next day or for the next week, and they are spending an exorbitant amount of time. I think we have data that says teachers spend an average of 12 to 14 hours a week finding resources to teach. And when our teachers are spending that much time trying to find stuff, A, the stuff might be of varying quality, and B, they're not actually focusing on children. We all came to this work to look at children and engage children and help our children learn. So one of the movements in the educational work right now is called a curriculum renaissance, and a lot of people are talking about a curriculum renaissance because our curriculum materials are better than they've ever been. And they allow teachers to choose within the curriculum. So instead of going to Pinterest or Teacher Pay Teachers or some of those outside resources and spending hours trying to find the right text or the right math problem or all those kinds of things, they actually go into their materials. They pick what makes sense for their children. They focus on their kiddos and they can teach. And we have heard story after story of how that's changed their career, hearing teachers excited again because they can focus on children and they're not focusing back on resources and spending so much time trying to get ready for tomorrow. I'm actually thinking about my children tomorrow and how to move my children's learning. I think it's one of the most exciting experiences that I've seen because it's so exciting for teachers. Yeah. And to hear teachers talk about it, but then to hear students talk about their learning in the same way that their teachers are talking about, it is a very exciting time to be in education.
Yeah. You know, when you think about early literacy just in general, you see this cascading effect. If we don't intervene early, then we see it's the 3rd grade reading scores fall, then the 8th grade math scores, then high school graduation, lack of post-secondary. I'm even hearing from military recruiters that we have kids that don't even qualify for military service. So those are the consequences of not doing this well. Workforce readiness is another one. What are some of the contributing factors that you see most significant around early literacy for Tennessee?
I think, and to speak to your data, our 3rd grade reading scores hover around 37% of our kiddos are reading at grade level, and then as they get older, we only have 27% of our high school freshmen who can access their content level texts. So that is a crisis. If we have children who can't access their high school texts, how are they going to read them to internalize that content and be successful in their post-secondary careers, successful in an ASVAB, or successful in their TCAT career? We are setting children up all the way through. And I think one of the biggest critical factors in that is when we teach children to read a lot of the time, we ask them to look at clues in the reading. So when I'm K3 and I'm looking at the pictures to figure out the words, or I'm looking at what I said on this page, I can kind of figure that out. But once that text gets harder, there's no more clues, and the text gets more complex. So when we teach children to read in early literacy, and we really take that time to teach them well and use that cognitive science, it sets them up to do a better job when they actually access content level text and it gets more rigorous, because the clues are gone then. And we're breaking down. I know all of us have had frustrated teenagers who don't want to do their homework, who don't want to read their text. It's hard if we don't teach them how to read in those early grades, and we don't really have them having access to high quality reading strategies in that text. And then the other thing we need to realize is they have to have context to build knowledge of the world. And a lot of times we say that little people aren't developmentally ready for rich and complex conversations. I will put that little 7-year-old who talked about the oasis that Martin Luther King was trying to create up against anyone who says that that's not developmentally appropriate. She was so passionate about what she had learned and the opportunities her teacher had given her. So I think it's important